Hey everybody, it's Charlie Dobbins, and it's another one of our group coaching calls. And this one, I'm very happy to have an old friend and a very, very good guest. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy what my friend has to say. Topic of his conversation is happens to be don't just know your team, know your team. And one of the nice things about this that he's going to give this talk is the fact that the reason why I'm having him on this particular call is because I want him to be on your team. If you find yourself in the type of situation that we're going to be talking about today, this is the guy you want to have on your team. So let me do a little bit of housekeeping, as we always say. Oops, hold on a second. Let me go back and fix that. Bear with me here 1 second. I see why that happened. Here we go. Let's try that again. Okay. So as I said, let's do a little bit of housekeeping here. As always, full disclosure, have to say this. I'm a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. Get a lawyer. And as I mentioned on my last call, the kickoff call, or maybe it was the offer running call, I'll be back on the road in March, end of February, beginning of March. Looks like Nashville and Charlotte will be the first two cities that we'll be going out there and talking on the road. Third thing is the due diligence boot camp video is now all set. It's up on the website. If anybody wants to gain access to it, I'll send you a link to purchase access to the due diligence boot camp. I got great reviews on that one. It was fantastic. And then the next thing is, as usual, if you haven't figured it out by now, if you have any questions, and you're going to have a lot of questions, if you have any questions, please type them into the question box so that I can take a look at them and get them over to our special guest here today, who happens to be my old friend, Robert Lang. Let me just see if, let me quote you some things that he has on his website. And I'm going to lay out right now just so you understand who he is and what he does for you. If you don't know how to reposition apartments, don't leave your repositioning to chance. It is usually very costly, and many investors have lost their properties, money, good credit. Let me see. Good credit. If you need to know how to make money by repositioning apartments, please call Robert. He is your solution. Don't guess about repositioning or hire someone that does not have a solid track record. Robert has personally repositioned over $1 billion in apartments in 25 years, overseeing as many as 10 repositionings at one time. He has the answers you need. Don't wait to contact him okay, I love this, when you cannot sleep, when you're bleeding cash flow, or when you're going under. Partner with him, and he'll show you how to reposition apartments for profit. He is the apartment director, okay? And then finally, this last point, I know we're all, see if this sounds familiar, guys. How many times have you heard me talk this way? I know where all the hidden minefields are that you can step into, and I'll keep you away from them. Why? Because I've been doing it for over 25 years, and I've come in behind those hired experts to save investors failing apartment communities. I have experience as a consultant, executive level management, asset manager, owner, investor, which gives him unique insights that others just do not have. Make him a part of your team and eliminate the surprises. Folks, I have been involved in successful repositionings. I've been involved in absolute disasters when it comes to repositioning. If you're new at this business and you think that you find a property that is a repositioning opportunity and you just stick the numbers into the cash flow analyzer and that's all you have to do, there is so much more that you need to know about repositioning opportunities that a guy like Robert, you need to have him on your side in order to understand exactly what you need to do. Don't go this alone. And I really had to laugh a little bit at his concept in there about, losing sleepless nights. Oh, trust me, folks, I know what that's like. When you're in the middle of a repositioning and it's not going, you're in big, big trouble and you just can't sleep nights. Don't as I always say, I'm going to teach you how to do this the right way. Don't put yourself in that situation. Always have the right people on the team, which is exactly what, when Robert told me what he wanted to talk about. And here's the topic right here. I thought this is absolutely perfect. So without further ado, allow me to introduce to you one of my oldest friends in this business, Mr. Robert Lang, the apartment director. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Charlie, and it's wonderful to speak to you again. We were just chatting a couple of minutes before. We hadn't spoken in, I think it's close to 2 years.
I know.
I want to congratulate the folks that are in your program, because I think that's a smart step for folks getting into the business, and even, to be honest with you, people that have been in the business. And that was the reason for the topic of my my subject today. Don't just know your team, know your team. And the reason that topic is today is because I had a personal experience with this, and because of that experience, I'm now in the final stages of forming a complete development management team, bringing in some of the most successful people in our industry, some folks from REITs and Wall Street and different things like that, because anything that you leave to chance is something that you really cannot afford in this business. You want to eliminate those hidden minefields, and I believe the first thing before you even find a property is about having the right team, not just thinking you have the right team. People can look good on paper. People can have a great resume, but if you don't know how they actually perform, how they ride the horse, you're putting yourself up for a lot of risk that you don't need. So, with partnering with someone like Charlie, and of course someone like myself, is going to eliminate a lot of those hidden risks that can pop up on a property. And, there are going to be, even being an expert like I am and have done over $1 billion, there are still going to be minefields. You're not going to eliminate all of them. And then it comes down to, once you already have acquired the asset, do you know how to deal with that minefield to where it doesn't destroy your property, your investment, and you lose it and you start bleeding cash? Charlie, can I share a little bit about one particular
please do.
asset?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think that is going to be the best thing we can do here on this call. Tell us your success stories. Tell us your disasters. My students want to hear it all.
Well, it's a disaster and a success story all wrapped up in one. And I have to use general terms right now. I can't give I can share the whole story, but I can't give exact terms on the property and stuff because we're still in the process of finishing it up.
Hey, hold on. Let me stop. Hey, Robert, let me just stop you right here. We do have one question here from a newbie, and it's a good question. Why don't you just start here before you tell that story? His question is, hey, what is the definition of repositioning? Like, he's new here. Can you explain what repositioning means? Which I guess I just take it, at face value that we all understand what a repositioning opportunity really means. But why don't you give us the definition?
Well, a term that a lot of folks will use is a value add play on an apartment. A repositioning, to me, is you have an asset that is not performing in its maximum cash flow. So what you do is you go into that property and you look at the property, you look at the competition, you look at the market, and you figure out a cost-effective plan to reposition that property into, say, maybe you have a 1980 asset, and you can reposition it by doing a value add, doing some interior upgrades, looking at the competition and seeing what they have and what you can add to your property and give you that unfair advantage. For example, something that's become very common in our industry, but a lot of folks still aren't doing this. So this is a really good tip for you guys if you want an unfair advantage of some of your competition. you can, of course, do bulk cable, but cable subscriptions are going down. What's really hot is the internet, and you can Wi-Fi your property now with the high-speed internet, buying it for bulk for, basically, 15-20% of what retail is. Well, you can make, $30, $40, $50 an apartment and still save them money. And that gives you an unfair advantage. I still go into markets, and I'm flabbergasted that hardly anybody's doing that. And that is such a simple thing to put in place. So that's what a repositioning is. And I can share, if Charlie, if anyone wants any information or anything, I've got some documents that have kind of all different types of repositionings I've done over my career that I'd be happy to share with it. You can send it out to your students, and I think that examples like that I think will help people understand the different things that you can do to reposition a property successfully.
Perfect.
Did I answer your student's question?
He'll let me know. He's going to send me back. He'll type it in and let me know how he did. So, yeah. So go ahead. Yes, he did. Yeah, we just got his response. All right.
Great.
So let's hear about this success story.
Well, yeah, it was one of the most challenging properties I've done in my entire career. Distressed asset is being nice. When we got into the property, I had a team in the management company. And the management company, by the way, was a Paragon Award-winning management company too. So they did one of the other partners in my group and the management company did the unit-by-unit walkthrough, the due diligence on the property. After we closed, we found that it was the Grand Canyon from the report to actually what was on the property.
Okay,
so
let me stop you right there and ask you why. Why did you miss it so badly, or why did somebody miss it so badly?
Well, again, if I had to go back and do this again, I personally would have walked the units myself.
Okay.
And again, that all has to do with don't just know your team, know your team. So going forward, that is of course never going to happen again in my project. The thing that turned it into such a challenge is, and I'll go over the different things that we found after I got out to the property. It was not only a gang-infested property. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the MS-13 gang, but it was actually a recruitment center.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I didn't even know that. The funny thing is, I didn't even know who MS-13 gang was. I have other stories I can tell you, but I want to keep it short and concise. Then we had, from what the pest control company told me, one of the worst bed bug infestations they had ever seen, included with their buddies, the roaches. And to give you an idea of the rat infestation, on a second floor, we found 12. We captured 12 rats in one apartment. Yes, yes. So you know all these things.
I got to tell you, it's funny that you talk about the gang activity, because I just completed the due diligence seminar, and in the fourth video, I tell people when you're doing the physical inspection, the physical walkthrough, if you see any sign of gang activity, forget the deal. Just leave. You cannot overcome the gangs, and you don't even want to bother trying. So it's very interesting that you said that.
Yeah. So. And then to top it off, the CapEx that we needed to do the renovations when we got into the apartments, it was going to be double what it originally was, because all the things that were missing. So, you think about this, and I'm going, okay, we bought the property. What the heck are we going to do now? I had to go and figure out a way where I could raise rents an additional $100 to $150 to make this property still successful. Now, with all that said, I ended up having to be on the property basically 2 to 3 weeks out of the month for the first year because of what happened. So it basically eliminated me doing anything else for that time frame. Now, the great thing is that we were able to make it successful. I mean, we've won awards. There's something called the National Housing Coalition. They have a meeting once every 3 years nationally. Our property won the best turnaround story for the year. I was interviewed by different news channels with the police departments because we were able to clean the property up gang-free and basically almost became virtually crime-free. We turned a property around that probably was getting close to the end of its use, and we turned it into something that I call a seasoned A property because, if I tell people it's an A property, they go, well, it can't be an A property, Robert. Well, it's not a B property either. And we were able to raise the rents another $100 to $150. So it's still going to be successful. We're still probably going to clear, $2 to $3 million when we sell it later this year. If I hadn't have been out there on the property, though, I feel pretty confident we would have lost the property. So, again, I had to do it. It was a very hard lesson for me to learn. So from that experience, and, I had a lot of developers, the bankman, he came by, he used to be a developer. He basically said, Robert, he said, if you can do this property, he said, you can do anything. He said, he said, ground up developments, he said, Robert, you should look into it. They're easier. So,
absolutely.
I guess the silver lining is in that could have been a really big disaster. I probably learned, Charlie, probably more in that year than I have in the last 10 years.
Yep.
Because I had to be on that property basically 3 weeks out of the month for that first year. But that's the reason now that, I've got a guy that I'm bringing from one of the larger REITs. He's got the #1 most successful track record in operations. Those are the type of people that I'm bringing in, folks that I've known, 7, 10 years. So when I get into these properties, I don't have all that exposure, all that risk, those hidden minefields when you put a team together. So that's the thing that I think is so wonderful with what you do, Charlie. You have the resources, you have the proven folks within your group that you can make sure your students don't have to go through something like I did.
Right.
And when we get completely done and we sell the property, I will be happy to share with you a lot of information that you can share with your students, and I think it will be very educational for them.
Excellent. Good. So whatever you have, send it on over. I can get it out to everybody, and I can also attach it to our membership site. So when people listen to this a recording again, they'll have your documents right there accessible to them.
Is there any other questions that any of your other students have at this point?
Not yet. So, but as we go through it, let's kind of talk about, if my students are looking for deals and they come across a property that, of course, it's always that one scenario that drives me crazy. It's when a broker tells you it's a C class in a B area or a B in an A, and you've never been to that property before. You've never been to that city before. What that to me is another definition of a repositioning, taking it from one letter grade to another, as you just described. But how is it when you get that initial opportunity across your desk? What are the types of things you look for as why this is a better repositioning opportunity than some other type of deal? Why would you say I'm going to do this one but not that one? What are you looking for?
Well, I think number one, before you visit the area, you can do the lion's share of research through the internet and, Google Earth, driving around the area. That's a great way to kind of get your feet on the ground without getting out there. And, I look for different things, and I've got a story that I can actually share with you. There was a property in Jackson, Mississippi that was a little over 400 units. It was called North Hill Square. I had the broker was basically saying, well, if you do this or that, you're probably, when you're done after repair values around 25, 27. Well, when I did my research, it came up minimum 40K per unit after repair value. And I'm not sure why he didn't figure that out, but that was great for me. And I actually had a high net worth investor that had committed to come in and do the deal. And there was really not a lot of interest in that property. But after, right when we were getting close to getting our LOI accepted, that investor backed out. And then I was left with, how do I get an investor at the very end of the rope? And I had to mass market it. And all of a sudden, this property became a very, I think, one of the more interested properties on the market at that time. And the reason I share this with you is I'll send you a website where what they did with it, and it was even more substantial than what I was talking about. They reinvested, I think, $7 million into the property and just turned it into, really it's an A property and just a grand slam. So, but the reason I looked at it and said, okay, this is a good property, it was on the wrong side of the highway, like we hear the wrong side of the railroad tracks, but it was close enough to where when you went under the highway, the interesting thing was on the opposite end of, on the other side of the highway, there was a very high-end kind of mall, ritzy mall. And I knew the trends in that area, coming up the highway, was pushing that market back up to a B plus and an A area. And that's the reason that I went into it and knew there was an opportunity. Now, after you figure out what's going on in the area, then Charlie, you got to look at the asset, which is pretty, to us is probably simple, but I'll go over the different things. You look at the, there's things you want to look out for. I personally, flat roofs, I try and stay away from those. The boiler chiller systems, no thank you. Aluminum wiring, no thank you. And another thing you want to look at, the wiring and different things beforehand for electrical. You want to look at the plumbing, how everything's laid out, because it can affect what you're doing. For example, if you want to upgrade the HVAC system and the wiring that's in there is not where it needs to be, you're going to have an additional cost of rewiring that whole apartment, putting in a new, and that can get costly. Same thing if you're looking at doing, we can do a rubs on this property for water, we'll say. Well, believe it or not, there are some properties that were plumbed ridiculous, like there's a hot and cold water line coming in the shared wall between two apartments, and then they tee off right at the fixtures. Well, you tell me how you're going to how you're going to put one monitor on that 1 meter. No, you'd have to mini meter by each one of them, depending on how the rules and laws are in different states, and people just don't think about that. But because I've seen so many of them, And it seems real simple, but you know what? These little things can be the difference between you being successful and between you just losing your shirt on a property.
And if you're a new investor, you're not going to even think about that. You're going to think you're going to hear about, like, oh, all we have to do is sub-meter everything. But you don't even know what that technically means, or if your units or your property can even be set up for that.
Correct. And another thing, for example, I'll go back to this property I was just sharing with you about. One of the things I was trying to figure out on how to increase the value of the property and the cash flow. That property had heat included, okay, because it was gas that came in, and it was not individually metered. But the units were getting to the point where they needed to be changed out, and the wiring in the property would not normally handle an electric heat pump. So I researched, finally came up with a solution to where we could replace it with a heat pump for about the same cost as a gas unit. Well, as soon as you start doing that, and we didn't have to rewire the whole thing either. I mean, I was involved, had the city inspectors and everybody, but we came up with a plan. So when those 200 plus units are completely switched over, I basically eliminated 80% of that gas bill, which is going to drastically increase our NOI by not spending any more than I would have putting in a gas heater.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Charlie, you know, as far as getting folks to know this, the best training that you have is shadow training. And that's basically kind of what you do. I mean, you're walking alongside your students, so when these things happen, I imagine you guys can come together and you can figure out a way to either, yes, we can fix it this way, we can make this successful, or no, we need to steer clear away from this asset. And recently what I've started doing, I don't really do a lot of consulting anymore. The only type of consulting I generally will do now, for example, I was just out in the Midwest, investor had a project that he's wanting to buy, and he brought me out there, go out there for 3 days, evaluate the property, evaluate the area, do a financial model for them, and then I will work with them for the next 30 days to help them kind of walk them through the process to make sure that this is an asset that they need to acquire. And it really, that's the big thing. You have to buy, when you buy the asset, that's where you make your money. So you need to make sure what you're buying and eliminate as many of those hidden minefields before you actually purchase the asset.
Right. I mean, that's exactly how real estate works. Profit is made when you buy it. It's realized when you sell it. Now, let's talk a little bit about how you value these properties, when you look at them. Now, you talked a moment ago about understanding what the market is, the ARV for these properties, but kind of give us a snapshot or just a thumbnail of how you go about laying it out there. If the after repair value is $46,000, what do you buy a property like that for? And how do you figure out all the costs in between?
Well, I mean, number one, you've got to figure out what you can, what your maximum rents can be. And so I will look at the property, look at the units, and then I will go out to the market and look at the competition. And that can be similar assets, and that will also be, assets that have already been repositioned, and they did the upgrades, and then also looking at the newer product, like, say you have 2010 or newer developments in the area, and then you figure out, okay, with this particular asset, what can we do that's going to maximize that value? You know, a lot of these older assets, they're just, you know, the best reposition I like after dealing with what I just did is I like the ones that are structurally sound, that don't have, all you need to do is go in and do an upgrade as far as the kitchen, the bathrooms, the flooring, the light fixtures, and then spruce up the exterior, the buildings, and the landscaping. And you know, and then a lot of times you can come in, you know, $50 to $100 less than that brand new construction that's in the area, and you know, you're raising your rents $100 or $200 on those units.
Okay, so you start from the income side. You figure out what the maximum, you know, gross potential rent that can be generated on that type of asset. And then you probably have to, you know, you're backing, my assumption is that you're backing into the NOI. And, you know, you're going to have to obviously know what the expenses are going to be in that marketplace for that type of an asset. Is there any type of rule of thumb that you use for an expense ratio?
I generally look at the different expenses in the area and talk to different contacts in the area. And like I said, I have some other contacts that work for national rates, and I like to bounce things off them as well, just to make sure that the expenses are reasonable. I generally like to go a little bit higher than normal.
Sure.
I'm very conservative both ways on the rents, the max rents, and also expenses. So you're better off being conservative, not trying to be so tight on the expenses. But it really depends, Charlie, it really depends on the property, whether you have utilities that are included, and
right,
what age the property is. If you do venture out and get one that has a flat roof, there's just different things that are going to affect those expenses. I don't really have a general rule of thumb. Same thing with each property. Everyone asks me, okay, well, what are you going to do? You know, I used to have owners, okay, we've got this problem, I got this property, what are you going to do? And I just tell them, I said, I don't know. And they'd kind of look at me funny, what do you mean you don't know? I thought you were an expert. I said, that's why I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. I have to go through the full analysis of the property and where it's at. I mean, and that analysis can get very, very detailed, from the point of, you know, actually going to a property and having my staff do a cross-section phone interview with the residents to find out what's going on that property. So there's no cookie-cutter thing for each property. I mean, it's unique to that property. It's unique to that sub-market, and why there's some general things that you need to look at. It's kind of like if you're an expert carpenter. You know, I can give you all the best tools, and you're going to know how to use them. Well, I can give somebody that doesn't have experience as a carpenter, and of course, we all know they're not going to be able to use those tools. Mm. So I think if you know, your students are just starting out, you know, it's advisable to have somebody on their team like you. I don't know if you have anybody that goes out to these assets that they're looking at purchasing. If you don't, I'd recommend them hiring somebody that has my experience, that knows what to look for.
Okay, let me ask you this. I got to watch the time here. When you go to, you know, reposition or you know, rehab a unit, what types of things do you do? What are the easiest things to get done? What type of a budget do you budget for when you're repositioning? Let's say, you know, your standard 2-bedroom, 2-bath, or 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bath type of unit. What do you do?
Well, generally, if you're buying an asset, an older asset that's distressed, you're looking for a value-add play. So there's going to just be some simple things that you're going to want to do on the interior units. If you're looking at the cabinets, first thing we'll look at the cabinets are they in good shape? You know, are the boxes, are they solid wood? Is it something that you can refinish? Or refinish the doors if they're all wood, or refinish the boxes and just put new doors on them or new hardware. And then also look at the cost comparison as far as putting new cabinets in. Then, of course, you're going to want to look at the faucets, the appliances, the flooring, countertops. Generally, you know, we'll do something in the kitchen, in the bathrooms, usually new light fixtures, the new faucets, new flooring. The vinyl flooring, a lot of it's outdated. You know, we like to go in with the faux wood vinyl flooring. And then, you know, a little bit better carpet grade than you see in apartment grade carpet. So just some simple things. For example, they may have outdated doors. We'll go with the 6-panel doors. We like to go with brushed nickel. But again, you know, as far as giving an actual budget, I mean, if the apartment community is in good shape, depending on what you're going to do, you know, somewhere between $2,500 to $10,000, depending on how extensive of a renovation it's going to be. If you're replacing HVAC. You know, if you have any examples of properties that maybe some of your students are wanting to take a shot at, maybe what I could do for you after this is just give you my input and,
Sure.
and send you something over in general of what I think it would cost, you know, with the different costs that we've, you know, what we've paid out on different properties we've renovated.
Okay, absolutely. So, all right, let's say you get the units renovated. How do you work it? Let's say, you know, there are 10 buildings. Do you shut down the whole place and renovate everything, and then, you know, move everybody out and move everybody back in, or do you take it like we'll work on one building at a time? What's your preferred way of repositioning the property?
Well, again, I go back to the same thing. It really depends on the property and what you're going to be doing at the property. If it's a real minor rehab, you know, why move out the current residents that are good quality residents? I mean, if you have residents that are not, you know, quality residents and you want to get them out, that's a different thing. But why hurt your cash flow? So I would go into, say you have a building of 12, and you know you have half of them that have good quality residents in. I mean, I think what you would be doing is you're starting to renovate these units. You know, you've done your lease audit, so you know which residents you really want to target to keep. I would be encouraging those residents, hey, Charlie, we love that you're living here. We appreciate it. We're, of course, doing all these upgrades in the unit to give you a better community, better atmosphere. And as one of the longtime residents here, we'd like to offer that to you. So, so say you have that building and you have those folks move into the new apartments, then you can finish the other ones once they move out. And then you move on and you're done with that building. I mean, it doesn't exactly work that way. That would be perfect if you could do it that way. But that would be the way that I would handle it. Because that way you're not hurting your income. You're not losing income. And usually what happens is you're going to be able to rent to new residents at the same time. You know, you may not get enough people that transfer. You'll get some of them that want to transfer right now and move into a new apartment, but those other ones you can put in with your new residents. So if you do it that way, but you got to be smart in how you do it as well. You know, it's like a chess game. So you've got to continually monitor the process and how it's going. Do you need more one bedrooms? Do you need more two bedrooms? It really is driven by the market and your residents that are transferring into those new units.
Right. Now, what, as far as the time frame, especially if you said you've had to go onto these properties for 3 weeks out of the month, how long should a repositioning take? I mean, let's just on your standard, and I guess it isn't really even standard. It's like, regardless of how big the apartment is, you just have to hire more bodies. But how quickly can you get in and get out of a deal when you take it on?
I think you want to be conservative on it. And after my last experience, I would give yourself, depending, we'll just say an average, 100 to 200 units, somewhere between 18 to 24 months, depending on the, how extensive the renovations are. It also depends on the turnover and what percentage occupied you are right then. All those factors are going to affect your timeline. And the other part is, of course, everything has to work together, meaning you could have an incredible construction crew and they're blowing out 10 units a week, but your leasing and marketing team is not keeping up with them. So again, you need to have somebody that's on your team that's monitoring that process and knows how to do a tune-up, in real time. You can't be just looking at these and a reposition, just looking at the reports. You've got to have somebody that's actively involved in the day-to-day process of that. And while there's excellent management companies out there, and this is not to talk down about management companies, they're incredible management companies. But what I want to make the clear distinction is there's a difference between a management company and a repositioning company. They're two different things. Generally, I would say management companies are great for managing your asset, the day-to-day activities. But as far as a repositioning that you're looking to complete within a certain time frame, I think you need to look outside the box of a regular management company to handle that for you.
Interesting. Interesting. So, all right. Well, give us some examples. Some of your best war stories, and some great anecdotal stories, even about stuff that's gone on.
Well, I guess as I go back over my career as an investor, as a consultant, as an executive, with one of the larger owners. One story comes to mind. I went to work in-house. It was the only time I've actually worked in-house for an owner, and that's because we've been friends for 25 years. I worked in-house with their group, and I wanted to do a test. They had just purchased some assets from Home Properties in New York, which is one of the larger REITs in the country. And just a sidebar, actually, I was on the pre-capitalization team for Home Properties before they had their IPO, and my teams, we fixed half of their assets before they actually went public. But they sold all their assets in upstate New York, and there was a large property in Buffalo, northern Buffalo, Tonawanda, Raintree Island, and Paradise Lane. And when they took over the property, it went from like 95% down to 60% occupied. And they have I think one of the best management teams as far as consistency. Very incredible. I've always been impressed, and I've seen a lot of folks all over the country. But one thing you could say, I could go to one of their properties, what I would consider not such a desirable area. They still, when you drive onto that property, you can tell it's a Tri-City rental property. Okay. Now that project went down to 60%. I said, you know what? I know there's other experts out here in the field. I'm going to bring in who I think is the best right now. And so to turn that property around, I called up because I knew the owner. I'm not going to mention names, but we brought their team up there to reposition that property. And I supported them, in any way that I could, but it was their challenge, and unfortunately, they weren't successful. So what I had to do is I had to go back and I hired and trained my own staff to do the lease up. Now we got it up to 95%, back to 95% again within, I think it was like 6 to 8 months. Okay, now this is like a 12, I think it was 1,100 total units. And again, it's all about knowing how to look at the market. It's knowing how to put the right plan together and then having the right team. If you've got, if you're baking a cake, you start missing ingredients and all of a sudden you don't have a cake. For example, the folks that are representing your investment, a good way to check it out. This is the easiest way to check out how your property's doing. Call your property and pretend you're looking for an apartment. Before you get off that call, you're going to know why you're not successful. And it all has to do with the team that you have on site. So we turned that property around in, like I said, 6 to 8 months. And it was right during the time that utility rates and gas was going up, and they wanted to charge a utility surcharge onto the heat. And I told the owner or the CFO and the general manager, don't do it. It was a lot of heavy lifting to turn around. I basically called it the Titanic because it was so big. I said, you're going to sink this if you do this. They went ahead and instituted that utility surcharge, and unfortunate thing that happened, it went back down that winter, back down to 65%. So, it's really important that you understand the pulse of your investment. And that means real time, somebody that's on your property, not just somebody that's sitting back, making the decisions from far away. So the reason I share that with you, again, it goes back to having somebody on your team that is taking that pulse for you on a regular basis.
I tell you, it's just what you said. It's so many times I see these new students show up with a property and they think they're going to try some value-add proposition, such as we're going to convert from an all bills paid to an individually metered tenant paid property, and they have no idea what the market will support, and they fail 100% of the time if they don't know what the market is going to bear. It's all about what the market's going to do.
One thing that I was just thinking of, Charlie, for your students, I'd be happy to do this for a handful of them if it would be helpful. If you have any of your students that are evaluating properties right now that they're looking to purchase, I'd like to make that offer to you. If you'd like me to take, kind of a quick executive summary look at it and give you a few bullet points, I'd be happy to do that for you.
That'd be great. Now tell me, let's talk a little bit more about that. Instead of just let's say if one of my students really wanted to engage you and they found that right deal, and they thought, geez, this is more than I can handle. I know that this is going to be a full and complete repositioning. I got a day job. I can't be, on this site all the time. How would they work with someone like you to bring you in? What type of compensation? What type of deal structure? How do you like to operate?
Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, I have investors hire me for a flat fee to come out and analyze their potential investment, and I'll be out there for 3 days physically in the area, shopping the competition, analyzing the property, the market. And of course, I'll be doing research, a week or two before I come out there. And then we have, after that visit, we have 30 days where we'll continue to communicate, and I'll help them, craft what I think they should offer on, to make an offer on that property.
Yeah.
Going forward with that, if they wanted to partner, with our group, that's some of the things that are starting to happen now, especially since we're, getting ready to open up our own management and development company. We're actually putting an LOI in a 300-plus unit out in the Midwest right now, and then one in Texas that's about 250. So, we're going to be able to offer quite a bit for investors because, again, a management company that doesn't have skin in the game doesn't have skin in the game. And I don't think I need to say anything else than that. I think you understand that. Your students understand that. And the other thing I want to point out, if you do go with a management company, and I was just talking to another one of my potential partners about this. I said you need to be careful. I said if they're fee management plus their owners and operators, at the bare minimum, you need to make sure that they don't have an asset in your area if you're going to have management. Because it's going to be conflict of interest. If you go with a management company, the smart management companies that really want to help the investors and owners, they tend to be generally just fee management. And I've had them tell me that. That's the only reason we're not doing investments right now is because our goal is to help the investor. So that's something to think about when you're going forward. But with partnering with us, we would partner with you. It could be, we could be co-sponsors, help with the debt and different things like that, as well as, we would be personally managing the asset ourselves. Now, I will say that we look for, our target, I would say the ideal target is 200 plus units. But if there's something that's a little bit lower than 200, maybe 150, that would be something that we look at. And we could, and again, how do we do it? It really depends on the deal. It really depends on what everybody's bringing to the table. But it's got to be a win-win for everybody. So.
All right. So there's a couple questions here. If anybody has any questions, we're coming up on the end of our hour. Let me just run through some of these. Have you ever been involved in any ground-up construction? And do you have any insight regarding that and how that can be shared?
That's a great question. I have been involved in pre-planning or ground-up, but I've never been point person on a ground-up development. I've got a couple of ground-up development deals I'm looking at right now. One of them is a piece of property that my family owns, and then another owner that really doesn't want to develop it but would like to do something with it. So I'm looking to partner with, construction development company that I would oversee. So, I really can't make a lot of comments on that because I'm not an expert in that field. I'm going to be doing exactly what I'm telling you to do is to make sure you get the right development, right general contractor to handle that for you. And there's a lot of great ones out there. You can just go on the different, like Multifamily Executive. They've got, I think, the top 25 builders, developers, et cetera. And a lot of those guys will, if you have a piece of land that you've got tied up that's in it's all about the location. If you've got a piece of land that's in an excellent location, they will come because that's what they're looking for. So if you have one of your students has a great location, a piece of property that they have, I'd be happy to talk with them about it because I'm in the process now working that on two different pieces of property.
All right. Another question here is, if somebody, can you be a little bit more specific on exactly the types of deals, repositioning opportunities you're looking for? You mentioned 200 units. Is there any type of geographical area that you prefer? What is too little for you? What is too big? Like what exactly is your perfect fit?
Well, again, the 200 plus unit, and I'm a little bit more open. For example, one of the properties that we're purchasing was built in 2014. And there's a real simple value add play that was left on the table that we're going to do. The other property that we're doing in Texas is a 1980s construction, 200 plus units. We're going to do, I wouldn't say a heavy, but a medium renovation. I'll probably spend $5 to $7 grand per unit on it. Location-wise, I like the Midwest. I like the Southeast. But I will tell you that if you have a solid deal in an area, I will 100% take a look at it because now with the team that I have, especially the gentleman that I'm bringing on from the REIT, you know, he's got 50 proven on-site property managers that are willing to go where we get the deal. So if you have a great deal and a great location, you know, it's worth us having a call, and I'd be happy to take a look at it. And if it's something that we're interested in, you know, it'd be worth us coming out and evaluating the deal and see if that's something we could do together. Or, again, I'm more than happy to come out there and you just hire me to evaluate the deal for you as well.
All right, cool. Now, a final question here. Somebody picked up on something you just said. Is what type of value add was missed in a 2014 built property?
That's a great question. So your student gets an A+ today.
I won't.
You know, it's really
tell him
interesting. It's really interesting. You know, I wasn't even really looking at that, and I had another investor, potential partner, that sent me the information. Then I started drilling down on it, and I was like, oh my goodness, this guy has built this property in an A location. You know, the bones of it is an A property, but he just did it as a B property. So it's just some really simple upgrades to the interior units. Some, you know, sprucing up to the exterior landscaping, and adding a couple of hidden ancillary income streams to it, and all of a sudden you have a simple value add play. I mean,
so in other words, when he built the property, he kind of cut corners when he probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, it's great for us. He's still, you know, I'm sure he still, you know, did very well on the property.
Yeah.
But what he did, you know, he made it so it'd be a, you know, a good buy for someone like our group. You know, and that's something to think about, you know, Charlie. One thing, you know, after, again, I bring up this property that we're just finishing up, is, you know, you need to also think about your returns as far as not just what the dollar return is going to be, what's the time, what's the heavy lifting, what's the focus, you know, versus the return. You know, I mean, this property here that we're buying is going to be, I mean, it doesn't get any simpler than this one. I mean, I think you'd have to try and screw this one up. So I think that's something, you know, I think that's something that you have to look at when you're doing these. You know, what do you want to do? Now, if you don't have a proven repositioning team, I would look for more of the easy, you know, renovations where you can just go in and do a quick upgrade to the kitchen, the bathroom, maybe the flooring and light fixture, you know, and maybe spruce up the exterior, you know, and you're good to go. You know, you don't want to get into the project that I just told you about. I will not do another project like that again. I can promise you that. Absolutely not.
Oh wait, which one? Which one won't you do?
The one that I told you about with the gangs, with the
right, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, no,
Life is too short.
Once was
Life
enough.
is too short. I believe me, I've done that myself. I'll never do it again. And yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, it's funny you say that because I see some stuff come over from my students, some deals they're looking at, and I look at the property. I know they're so new. They don't know what they don't know just by looking at the pictures of these types of properties they send over. And right away I cringe and I think to myself, oh man, you don't want to own this type of property. It'll eat you alive. And you just, the only way you know that is having lived through it yourself.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's the good thing, though. I mean, see, they're sending them over to you, and I'm sure you are, giving them the information so they understand that, hey, you don't want to do this property. And that's great thing. I imagine you're...
Oh, I tell them flat out, and the students on the call know that. Like, believe me, you don't want this one. Let's move on. I won't. I actually tell them I won't allow you to buy this property. Let's find another one. So it's yeah. So well, Robert, we're done with our hour. That was actually very fast. So why don't you give your phone number and contact information, phone number and email, so people can get a hold of you. And of course, as I just said, that people are now sending in more questions. Okay, so let me just run through these two questions. First off, what was the information about the meters and the sub-meter related to the wall? At the very beginning, you talked about the water coming in and having the T split off. Can you kind of explain to people here how that impacts your decision on whether it's a repositioning or not, or a successful repositioning or not?
Well, again, it's all part of the puzzle. For example, if you want to do a build back or rubs on the water, you need to look and see how the building is plumbed. If it's one hot, one cold, feed into that apartment, and then the rest of the apartment is plumbed out, that's a really easy thing. You can just put a meter on the hot and the cold. Some states do hot water allocation, where you just have to put it on the hot water. But that's a simple rubs program. If it has, like what I explained, where you have a hot and cold water line coming in to the apartment, and it tees off. Imagine, it tees off right there at the sink on one side in the kitchen, and the sink on the other side in the adjacent apartment. That's one line for cold going into two apartments. So, and the same thing with the hot water, it's teeing off right there. I don't know why they ever plumbed it that way, because that's just crazy. But what you would have to do, depending on the rules in that particular state, some states you would have to put a mini meter on a hot and a cold, hot and a cold. So you've got 4 meters just on the kitchen sink. And then you go down to the dishwasher. Then you go into the bathroom. It's just a nightmare even trying to do it. And the cost astronomically goes up. And these are just things that and I've learned because I've seen it, and I'm like, how do we do this? And I tried to figure out a way to get around it, and there was really no way that made any sense. And because the rules they had in that state, you could only do hot water allocation on that, or do exact metering with the hot and cold. It just didn't make any sense for us to do it.
Wow, and you can't figure that out until you get in there.
Well, see, that's the thing about when you do due diligence. You need to understand. You need to be looking at these things. Oh, we're going to do a hot water. We're going to do a build back on the utilities. Really? Well, tell me how you're going to do that on this property, not how you did it on another property, because the wiring, the plumbing, everything is different.
Yep. So now let me ask you one final question here. Somebody on the call has has some experience with you, I guess. he wanted you to talk about the Greensboro Airport opportunity that you bid on. He says it's a good example of thinking outside the box on a value add. Do you know what I'm referring to, or who I'm chatting with here?
The Greensboro opportunity outside the
airport opportunity.
There's been several different opportunities in that area. I'm honestly I'm not sure what that is. If it's somebody that I know, they're more than welcome to get in touch with me after this phone call. I'm not sure.
He's trying to give me cryptic examples here. He says it was with Kathy.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that was okay. Yeah, that was a smaller property, but it had a strong value add. I don't even remember how many it was, but we already had a property in the area, so it was kind of like an add-on. It would have been an additional, a standalone asset. So I already had resources on the ground. So that was a smaller property. I think it was like 50 units or something like that. But what was the exact question on that?
He says good. He's using it as a good example of thinking outside of the box on a value add opportunity, and that you were outbid on the property. I don't know if you're working with it. We love to call this particular member of the class Uncle Bob.
Uncle Bob. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Uncle Bob. That's okay. Yeah. Good. Hey, Bob. Yeah. So that was another interesting value add opportunity. Again, it was newer construction, but there was a value add play on it, and again, it comes down to looking at when you do a value add, it's looking at the cost, the risk when you do that. I'm not sure if there was a specific answer that Bob was looking for, but he's more than welcome to give me a call afterwards. I'd be happy to discuss it with him.
Sure. All right. Well, I gotta wrap it up here because we've already gone long. But Robert, why don't you go ahead and give us your phone number and your email, and how people can get a hold of you.
Yeah, the easiest way to get me is apartmentdirector.com. That's my website. My email address is just rlang, L-A-I-N-G, at apartmentdirector.com. You can reach me in my office at area code 518-207-0072.
Excellent. Excellent. So yeah, and this is obviously going to go on my website, my membership site, so people will be calling you for years. And if you can get me over those documents, I will attach them to this recording. So as people listen to the recording, they'll be able to reference those documents right away. That would be great.
Okay. That'll be great, Charlie. It was great talking to you, and let's
catch
up sometime next week.
I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.